President Ibo Osiji, President Kwan, Judge Chung, Judge Akane, Registrar Lewis, Ambassador Stehauer, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome to this kickoff event for the Asia-Pacific Forum of The Hague. My name is Sash Jayawardene. I work in the External Relations and State Cooperation Unit of the Registry of the Court, and I will be your MC for this afternoon. Today's event is a collaboration between the International Criminal Court and the Hague Project, Peace and Justice. The Hague Project is a joint initiative between the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the City of The Hague that aims to consolidate The Hague's reputation as a global center of excellence for peace, justice, and security. I would like to thank the Hague Project, particularly Ambassador Nora Stehauer, for co-organizing this event and for helping to ensure so many students and young professionals from the Asia-Pacific region here today. This event is a first step towards exploring and promoting the engagement of the Asia-Pacific region with the international peace and justice institutions here in the city. Today's event is going to focus particularly on the International Criminal Court and its engagement with the region, and importantly, how all of you can engage more closely with the court and its mission. Before inviting our first speaker to the stage, I'd like to share some information about this afternoon's program. It will run for 2 hours and 45 minutes without a break, but with a reception, so you have that to look forward to. It's being streamed online to a global audience via Facebook Live, and we will be taking their questions during the Q&A segment. I would like to ask that you switch off your mobile phones for the duration of this event, unless you are inviting your friends and family to watch us online, in which case you can just put your phones on silent. So to begin this afternoon's program, I would like to invite the President of the International Criminal Court, Judge Chilo Ibo Osiji, to deliver his welcome remarks. Judge.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, judges, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Criminal Court. I greet those gathered in the room today and those also joining us in the virtual world of Facebook from around the world. It is inspiring and encouraging to see so many students and young people gathered here. I thank the Hague Project for Peace and Justice for the excellent cooperation they've given in organizing this event. Thank them very much. The Asia-Pacific region is a most critical region to humanity. It is home to half of the world's population and 30% of the global land mass. It is for that reason that we observe that it is a matter of concern for us that only 36% of countries in that region are party to the Rome Statute, the foundation treaty for this court. We will compare that to 89% of participation from the Western Europe and other groups, region, the WEOC group. 85% of subscription from the CRULAC region. 78% of participation from the East European group, and 61% of participation from the Africa group. Against that background, there's a long way to go from 36% for the region. Such low participation means that a significant portion of the global population is at risk of not benefiting from the promise of justice that the Rome Statute offers the world through this court. On Tuesday, we will commemorate the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. And it is especially appropriate at this juncture to emphasize why universal participation of the Rome Statute is critical to humanity. For many of the young people in this room, 20 years may seem like quite a long time. For many of you, the court has been in existence for most of your lives, at least the Rome Statute. But for some of us as well, including myself, we were young enough to remember the long road to realize the International Criminal Court. A road that has run its course and whose next twists and turns will fall upon your generation to navigate. That is to say, the mantle of this court and that of the Rome Statute is yours to take up and run. I must ask you to take up that task with authority and a real sense of ownership. What I'm saying in essence is this. This court belongs to the Asia region as much as it does to any other region. And I ask you to own it. Welcome, thank you, and happy deliberations.
Thank you, President Ibo Osuji, for those wonderful remarks and that very warm welcome. It's now my great pleasure to invite the President of the Assembly of States Parties, His Excellency Ogon Kwan, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you. President of the Court, honorable judges, Ambassador, Mr. Registrar, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to speak to you today. Asia is said to be the place where the international humanitarian law originated. Sun Tzu, if my pronunciation is correct, in The Art of War, a Chinese classic on military strategy, written in about 500 BC, defined humanitarian guidelines. I quote, "A commander must respect prisoners of war. He should avoid using needless violence. He should not seek the total annihilation of an enemy." End of quote. Likewise, the Indian Code of Manu, developed between 200 BC and 200 AD, referred in part to the protection of war victims. I quote again, "A soldier must not kill an enemy by using a hidden weapon. He must not attack an enemy who has surrendered or an enemy who is not ready for combat, who is severely wounded or is fleeing." End of quote. However, while Asia is the most populous and economically dynamic region in the world, Asian states are the least likely of any regional group to be party to most international obligations. there is no regional framework comparable to African Union, the Organization of American States, or the European Union. And the Asian states have by far the lowest rate of acceptance of the compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice and the membership of the International Criminal Court. For this reason, I have made it one of my main priorities as President of the Assembly of States Parties to pursue the universality of the Rome Statute during my term in office, particularly in my home region, the Asia Pacific, which unfortunately remains underrepresented. Ladies and gentlemen, I have had the privilege of serving as a judge at the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia for 15 years from the year of 2001 to 2016. Adjudicating a case as a member of bench representing and acting on behalf of the international community is an honor and duty, both exhilarating and intriguing. I therefore understand firsthand the importance and the need to fight against impunity worldwide. Various international criminal courts and tribunals, be they ad hoc or permanent, international or hybrid, represent necessary and critical efforts to ensure accountability for heinous atrocities. But the need for these tribunals means that the international system has failed to prevent such crimes. However, we now have in place when these violations occur, and this is a fundamental advancement to recognize the principle that impunity must not be allowed for unimaginable atrocities against humanity. The goal of achieving accountability through international criminal justice has now become a significant part of the international legal order. However, it is still a work in progress, a project in its infancy, and as such, we have an obligation to future generations to care for its development. Next week marks an important milestone in this process. On the 17th of July, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, the founding treaty of the ICC. Over the past 20 years, there has been remarkable headway in bringing to justice people accused of mass slaughter, rape as a weapon of war, and crimes against humanity. For example, Thomas Lubanga Diallo from Democratic Republic of Congo was convicted in 2012 for conscripting and enlisting children and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Lubanga's verdict broke new ground in criminalizing the use of child soldiers. Further, on the same day, 17th of July, the provisions regarding the crime of aggression will take effect for the first time in history. In spite of these positive developments, international justice continues to face immense challenges today, especially with an alarming increase in international crimes over the past 5 years, particularly in countries that haven't joined the ICC. For one thing, in terms of structure, the court's jurisdiction can only be triggered if either the country where the crime occurred or suspect's home country has accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC. The exception to this requirement is when UN Security Council refers a situation to the court. The situation limits geographically the court's reach, impairing as a result its capacity to reach out to civilians suffering from horrific crimes in a number of conflict-torn places around the world. In this regard, I like to emphasize two most important challenges facing the ICC: the issues of cooperation and complementarity. First, cooperation. With no police force to execute its arrest warrants or other judicial orders, the court must rely on the government of the nations where the individual suspect resides for their arrest and or to assemble needed evidence and witnesses. For example, the court has been unable to arrest President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan over charges of crimes against humanity in Darfur and has struggled to get arrest of even lower-level suspects in countries such as Libya. In terms of complementarity, the International Criminal Court is a court of the last resort. As such, its jurisdiction can only be triggered when domestic jurisdiction is unable or unwilling to deal with the situation therein. In other words, it's the obligation and responsibility of individual countries concerned to investigate and prosecute heinous crimes committed within their own jurisdiction. In this regard, I find it unfortunate that a state in the Asia-Pacific region, the Republic of Philippines, has begun the process of withdrawal from the Rome Statute, notwithstanding this principle of complementarity. In this context, and in my capacity as President of the Assembly of States Parties, I have and will continue to reach out to many countries in the world, but particularly the Asia-Pacific region, with the hope of including more states within the Rome Statute system, thus fulfilling the goal of universality. I have no doubt that this event will generate significant momentum in raising awareness about Rome Statute system in general and the mandate of the court in particular. I am hopeful that we can increase, through our shared efforts, engagement with the court from states in the Asia-Pacific region. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, President Kwan, for that wonderful overview of the Rome Statute, which indeed we are commemorating next week. And on that note, before we start our first panel discussion, we would like to share with you a short video that is going to help set the stage for that dialogue.
Yeah, go beyond go when you wear at get a word and a bit of macadam, and you go beyond and go out. I was a cat watch you while a dog at you out when you wear out.
სოფელში რა ვიყავი ღამით მსროლები რო დაიწყო გამომეხვიძა
Kisha kuwa baba na mama balikamataka bafie 5 bakaenda bakatubaka.
Abstention 21. Le statut est adopté.
The hope of humankind that compassion and compromise may replace the cruel and senseless violence of armed conflict. That is the law as prescribed by the Rome Statute that binds this court, as well as the UN Charter that binds everyone.
There are times when we are told that justice must be set aside in the interest of peace. It is true that justice can be dispensed when the peaceful order of society is secure. But we have come to understand that the reverse is also true. Without justice, there can be no lasting peace.
This brings us to the first panel discussion of this afternoon. Before inviting the judges to take the stage, I'd like to note that the panel will be followed by a Q&A session, and we will have 2 microphones available for your questions. If you would prefer to write down your questions, you can also do that and use the note paper provided. Signal one of our colleagues and they will collect your questions. And we will also take questions from Facebook Live, so you can begin to send those questions in now. I would now like to invite ICC Judge Chang-Ho Chung from the Republic of Korea, ICC Judge Tomoko Akane from Japan, as well as Ambassador Nora Stehauer, who will moderate this session, to please take the stage.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all. It's so great to see you and so many people here in the room, and good afternoon to those who watch through Facebook. I'm told there are many diverse groups today here in the room. So first of all, I would like to raise hands by the Chinese group of students who were here for the finals also of this morning's moot court. And congratulations, Beijing Normal University. Where are the Chinese students? Yeah, there are some. Okay, great. We have in the room students from diverse universities in the Netherlands. Can I see hands, please? Yes, there they are. Yeah. The participants of the summer course of the Hague Academy. Yes. Staff of the Asian embassies in The Hague and Brussels. No. Yes, yes, very good. Staff of the ICC. Welcome, very good. And maybe I forgot, welcome also to the representatives of NGOs and civil society. Very good that you all can be here this afternoon. So my name is Nora Stehauer, and I'm very honored to try to moderate the first part of the discussion this afternoon. I represent the Hague Project on Peace and Justice. It was already mentioned, a joint initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the City of The Hague. The project aims to cooperate with international organizations, courts and tribunals in The Hague in order to set, and I quote, peace and justice into motion. And you see the cubes, they are moving. We always do that through dialogue with the audience. And together with our stakeholders, our common ground is to trust in the rule of law and the joint effort for a safer and more just world. So we are very happy as an organization to cooperate with the ICC on this important event. In the context of the commemoration of 20 years Rome Statute, we hold today the kick-off event for the Asia-Pacific Forum of The Hague. We would like to explore greater engagement of the region with the Rome Statute system, not only today, but also in the coming years. The next 20 minutes, together with the judges, we will look back to 20 years ICC with the Asia-Pacific focus, but also look ahead to the upcoming 20 years. I would now like to introduce the judges from the court who are here today with us, and welcome to you especially, of course, both judges. Judge Akane, first of all, I would like to congratulate you because you are here only since March 2018, and you took your function as a judge very recently. Prior to joining the ICC, Judge Akane served as Japanese ambassador for the International Judicial Cooperation and for the sound development of justice systems in the world. She served in various public prosecutor offices in Japan, has many years of service, also as public prosecutor of the Supreme Public Prosecutor's Office in Japan. Judge Akane dealt with a broad range of criminal cases through investigation, prosecution, trial, and appeal. She was involved also in legal, technical assistance and capacity building for legal and criminal practitioners in the world during 9 years. And lastly, Judge Akane also has experience in academia as a professor of criminal justice practice at Nagoya University Law School and Chukio University Law School in Japan. Very good that you could join us, Judge Akane. I come to Judge Chang-Ho Chung. Judge Chung, first of all, I would like to compliment you because you are the one who inspired us for this event. You had the idea of this afternoon. Judge Chung serves as a judge for the ICC since March 2015. Prior to that, Judge Chung served as an UN international judge for the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia. Judge Chung has many, many years of experience as a judge in the Republic of Korea. I counted 17 years, of which 6 years as a high court judge. Judge Chung was also posted at permanent mission in Vienna and did some research work with London School of Economics and the University of Hong Kong. Fantastic that you are here. Judge Chung, if you don't mind, I'll ask you the first question. So my first question to you is, why did you choose to devote your knowledge and energy to international criminal justice?
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Your question reminded me my campaigning for the judgeship of the ICC. But that is always an important question, and that is something I need to reveal at the beginning of my so this kind of some event. So I really appreciate your question for that. But before giving my answer, let me use this opportunity to appreciate President Eboe Osuji and President Kwon for your inspiring speeches. And I also give my special thanks to Madam Ambassador and the Hague project of the City of The Hague and the ICC for supporting and realizing my idea of holding this forum. I'm very much happy to hold this forum today to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Rome Statute with prominent students and young professionals from Asian Pacific region. And I also appreciate all of you in this conference room and also those who are following through the streaming for your support and interest in the ICC and also international criminal justice. So as introduced by Madam Ambassador, I started my career as a Korean judge in early 90s. At that time, the international criminal law was still at the early stage of its development, and international criminal justice was not well known. So like other Korean judges, I just worked hard to produce a fair judgment in a professional and efficient way. But thanks to my master degree in international law and also my personal interest in international community. Since 2008, I could participate in many meetings of international legal organizations as a Korean delegate, and also and contributed to the development of many treaties and conventions. So such international experience finally guided me to have interest in this field of international criminal justice, and eventually led me apply for the UN judge position of the ECCC, the Khmer Rouge Tribunal in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And fortunately, I was appointed by the UN as a judge of a pretrial chamber of the ECCC, and almost 4 years, I dealt with many pretrial issues at the ECCC. And such experience as a judge of both national court and international court, again, guided me to have interest in this court, ICC, and also led me to run for the judge position of the ICC in 2014. And fortunately, again, I was elected, and since March 2015, I've been serving as a judge of this court. So in summary, and also in general, I can say that my interest in the field of international criminal justice has grown as I gain more international experience in the field. But I'd like to share one more aspect or motive that guided me to this court. When I worked for the ECCC, I could realize that not only ECCC, but also most of the international tribunals faced many challenges and criticisms, especially the criticism about inefficiency of the ICC. I thought that that was something urgent issue that needs to be solved by judges. So I wanted to make some meaningful contribution to procedural efficiency of the ICC, and that also motivated me to run for the ICC judge position. Now I'm here as a judge of ICC, and I understand well the important values of the Rome Statute and important goals of this court. And I also know well our mandate as a judge is to realize such goals and also accomplish such ideas through our cases, through dealing with our cases. I know that very well. But I also believe that it's important for judges to develop some effective judicial tools to make the whole court process more stable, more predictable, and more transparent. Right, we judges are usually taking quite a narrow perspective to deal with issues from specific stage of court process. But it's also necessary for judges to keep in mind the larger picture of court process to make the court process as a whole more efficient and effective. So for this purpose, we judges, especially since 2015, we really produced many such effective judicial tools. Briefly, I will introduce a little. Firstly, we tried to harmonize our practices on procedural matters. And I also proposed that these harmonized practices should be published through Chamber's practice manual to share with the public. And you can find this manual in our website, and you can find easily those harmonized practices of judges. Secondly, we also developed many tools to maximize the access and use of judges' decisions. And I also proposed to make a more professional database for judges' decisions. So we are in the process of making this new database and expect to launch by the end of this year. And thirdly, we also developed many tools to update and upgrade our e-court system, electronic court system. The ICC whole court process already technically supported, assisted by the e-court system. So I can say that ICC is already completely paperless court. So that requires to update our system in a regular basis. So these really work well and already solved many problems of this court. And we judges will continue such effort to make this court work in a more systematic way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Chung. Thank you very much for your inspiring words. Now, I would like to ask the same question to Judge Akane. Why did you choose to devote your knowledge and energy to international criminal justice? And while you are answering, I will go and sit in between you, because there's where I'm supposed to be.
Thank you for your question, Madam Ambassador. I'm a new judge of the ICC who was elected last December and started my new career here as a full-time judge from 11th June. So quite new. So always I am learning from other judges and also from Judge Chung about the efficiency of the court and also the e-court system. As I was already introduced from the ambassador, I have been a public prosecutor for a long time in Japan. So I'm a practitioner of the criminal justice system in Japan, and I'm not a career diplomat. I'm not a scholar of the university, just kind of seconded for several years to the court, to the university. But basically, I have been a public prosecutor of Japan. So my opinions are from my practices in the field. And as introduced, as a government attorney of Japan, from time to time, I have been engaging the international legal technical assistance and capacity building to the criminal justice personnel in the developing countries. Through my experience in the legal technical assistance and interaction with the criminal justice personnel from many countries, I learned that criminal justice practitioners in other countries work very hard to develop the criminal justice system in their own country to fight against heinous crimes, to put an end the impunity. But there are some hindrances. The hindrances include political interference and corruption or lack of good governance. At the same time, I learned from them the crucial is the rule of law. Rule of law is crucial to abate arbitrary decisions of corrupted people or abuse of power, and to contribute to the protection of human rights of both the accused and victims. The legal technical assistance and capacity building activities, I believe, could assist to enhance the spirit of rule of law among the criminal justice personnel, and that is one of the answers to the technical legal assistance, I believe. So after that, I came across the ICC. It was 2012. I had an opportunity to know the ICC's activities and its endeavor to put end impunity. I was impressed and moved by the lecture of the Madam Prosecutor, of the ICC who visited Japan when I was a prosecutor of the Supreme Public Prosecutor's Office. Several years later, I was nominated by the government of Japan as a candidate for the International Criminal Court judge. Through the campaign activities for the election, I learned that cooperation of the state parties is essential in the course of the ICC's core activities, such as investigations, arrest of the suspects, prosecution, court hearings, including witness testimony, and the enforcement of the judgment. It means that criminal justice personnel in the state parties need to make efforts to meet the request from the ICC. Through such cooperation, I thought the state may develop the criminal justice system and practice of the state. In short, I was impressed not only by the precious principle of the ICC, but also actual activities of the ICC and endeavor to put an end to impunity. And I decided to contribute to the work of the ICC by utilizing my expertise as a long-time public prosecutor of Japan and experience of the legal technical assistance and capacity building of criminal justice personnel in developing countries. I saw some common grounds in the ICC's work and my former job. So only 1 month experience at the ICC. So what I can say that is I make my efforts to bring justice to the criminals who committed the most heinous crimes in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Judge Akane, for sharing your experiences with us. And I'm sure that ICC, this will help also ICC in your current function. Asian states are, we have heard it already, less represented within the international criminal justice system than other parts of the world. Only 19 states are state party to the Rome Statute on a total of 123 states. Moreover, one state party, as we have heard, has announced its withdrawal. We face difficult situations in Syria, Yemen, North Korea, where the court has no jurisdiction. We saw a massive flight deportation of the Rohingyas from Myanmar to Bangladesh. Altogether, bad news for the region. So my question, and I will start to Judge Akane first, so I'll alternate. My question is, what can be done to attract new state parties in the region? And do you have any ideas as judges to improve the situations I was mentioning? And I have to ask both judges to be short already because we are running out of time. Sorry. Judge Akane.
Thank you, Ambassador, Madam Ambassador. Maybe thorough answer will be provided from Judge Chung later. But my main points are momentum at the time of the 20th anniversary and ways to realize its outreach activities like this to the young people. And such outreach activities must have some value and merit, and some of them are rule of law, as I said already, and the necessity of the cooperation with the ICC, with principle of complementarity in mind. That is summary what I wanted to say. But 20 years ago, as the Rome Statute was adopted, there was a momentum for the states to ratify the statute and join it. At the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Rome Statute, I hope this year we'll see the second surge of the momentum for joining the ICC. Many young people like you have gathered here, despite the very short notice for some of them. And at least you're eager to learn about the ICC and to know about the ICC. You may be a driving force of the state in the near future to move forward the country to be a party of the ICC. Many young people like this overwhelmed me, have overwhelmed me already, because I didn't expect so many young people gather at this court in a short moment. Of course, as I said, momentum requires value or merit to support it. I can see some positive signs in the Asia-Pacific region. For example, economic growth in the region leads to the people to pursue the sustainable development for their next step. You may know the United Nations SDGs 16th goal, Sustainable Development Goals 16. Rule of law is one of the key elements or factors to support sustainable development. Rule of law is now gaining ground, and many people support it as prevailing value. In order to promote the law, impartial and transparent criminal justice system, which actually works in the field, is imperative. Such strong call for rule of law from the field or civil society could be a strong backbone to the momentum for the state to join the Rome Statute system. Now, I'd like to switch to address to the government side. I believe that the leaders of a state, if they declare to join the ICC system, can show their strong political will to promote rule of law domestically and internationally, to contribute to the international criminal justice system, and to participate in the global efforts to end impunity. If such a global society, if such a strong political will is shown, such a decision will be welcomed by the global society, and of course, the state image will be going up tremendously. And in fact, the state can contribute to the work of the ICC. Okay, and to respond to the concern of some non-state parties, I will touch upon the principle of complementarity. Already the President Ogon touched upon the complementarity of the Rome Statute, but I will rephrase the complementarity again. State parties don't lose sovereignty and independency in dealing with criminal matter if they become the new party of the ICC. Rather, the state have to investigate and prosecute the criminal allegedly committed such crimes falling within the ICC jurisdiction. So only when the state is unable and unwilling to do so, the ICC can intervene. That is the principle of complementarity, and the ICC is not a substitute for the national courts. So if some state is hesitating to be a member of the ICC because of such fear, please convince your country, don't be worried.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Judge Akane. I'll now give the floor to Judge Chung.
Thank you very much again, and thank you very much, Judge Akane, for your excellent opinions. I will mention just 3 aspects briefly. Firstly, it seems to me that still most of the Asian Pacific states are more focusing on economic development and very narrow, very small, little room to take care of other issues. It's acceptable, it's understandable. But I'd like to emphasize that economic development of Asian Pacific states would become truly meaningful only if it is followed by the development of rule of law and the development of the human rights protection system. And further, it is also important to participate in, contribute to the international effort for rule of law and human rights protection system. So I'd like to emphasize that ICC functions as a center of such international effort. Secondly, I'd like to make it clear once again the meaning of becoming state party or member states of the Rome Statute. The most important role as a member state is to work together with other state parties to tackle international criminals for some nations who do not have their own capacity. That's it. The meaning of becoming the state party is to indicate confidence in your own judicial capacity and support some nations who have yet to reach that level. Thirdly, I also emphasize the important role of younger generation and the civil society of Asian Pacific region. Because always there is a limit to the development led by the government. So I hope younger generation of Asian Pacific region have more experience at international organizations and also international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Song. We are a bit running late, so I will shorten, and I will put together, if you don't mind, question 3 and 4. Question 3 concerns the role of victims. You know that victims are the centerpiece of the international criminal system today. So my short question, I had a long introduction, but I'm shortening it. My short question is, can you share your thoughts for the future of the system of the Trust Fund for Victims, and maybe also reparations? And then, can you also, closing the first panel, and by saying 1 sentence to the audience on how can the next generation help contributing to a permanent function and support of the court? You already mentioned, by the way, a lot about that, but maybe you would like to round up. So victims and the last sentence. So I'll first start with Judge Chung and then Judge Akane.
Right, it's quite unfortunate that we do not have enough time for these most important issues of the court. Right, as you know, the victim issue is one of the most unique and also important part of the Rome Statute. So judges have developed already many decisions on victim participation, and we also harmonized most of the practices on victim participation as well. You can find our practices on victim participation in our Chamber's practice manual that I have already mentioned. You can find more details there. So I hope you can enjoy that later. And also trust fund for victims. This is in charge of implementation of reparation. We judges issue reparation order, but implementation of reparation is done by trust fund for victims. So they also have developed many measures to provide reparation and also assistance mandate, which does not require judge's decision to do it in a more efficient way and timely manner. But for the future, I'd like to recommend some issues. Always, when it comes to fund, the more, the better. I have no doubt that Trust Fund for Victims has done well for fundraising purposes as well, because fundraising, Trust Fund is not part of ICC court budget. So Trust Fund should raise a fund of its own. So it has done well, but we need to develop more innovative ideas for the future of this fund. And also, we have this good system, but it's also necessary for judges to bring this court closer to the victims as well. So we are waiting for victims' participation and we give reparation. But we also make ourselves more closer to the victims. So we have already developed many outreach programs, and also some judges sometimes do site visit, but we need to do more to help people have more sense of involvement and sense of ownership of their own cases. So I will keep looking at the possibility, for example, holding certain hearings, such as opening statement or closing statement in situation countries. And lastly, I want to think about the future of the Rome Statute as well. We have done well for 20 years, but now we need to see the next 20 years. There are many issues, but one thing I want to share with you. Rome Statute mandate ICC the important roles, but that is a little limited to pursue individual criminal responsibility of international crimes. But we also think about some other crimes or other human rights violations that do not reach the level of international crimes. Right, if those crimes are well treated by the national system, but then not problem. But we also develop some ideas what we can do if those crimes are not handled by national systems. So we can think about amending our Rome Statute to expand our subject matter jurisdiction. For example, environmental crime or human trafficking or terrorism. We can think about that. Or we can also enforce cooperation with the regional court of human rights. Right. Human rights court is different from criminal court. They are pursuing state responsibility. But for these crimes of human rights violation, with the cooperation with the human rights court, we can facilitate pursuing state responsibility for those crimes which ICC cannot cover. In this regard, I always emphasize the necessity of establishment of this regional human rights court in Asian Pacific region as well. So also think about this establishment of Asian Pacific Court of Human Rights maybe in next 20 years. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Jachung. Juchakane.
Yes. I understand that Rome Statute, victim protection, victim participation, and reparation with the creation of the trust fund for victims is very significant and opens a new horizon to the people, for the victims. But that's why includes some challenges in practice. And especially reparation has begun very recently, so there are not so many compiled cases yet. So what I can say is compiling more and more practices in reparations will see more productive results in the future for the victims. So I'd like to see the future of the reparation practices in the court. And as Judge Chun said, Trust Fund for Victims is suffering from the constraint of the budget. And I hope some proper assessment or remedy to be done in the near future for the victims fund. That is what I can say about the reparation. But for the future of the International Criminal Court, there are so many young people here, and there are various ways to contribute to the ICC in the future, I think. One way is to work for the ICC from the inside, to apply for the staff or a judge or prosecutor in your future. Please work hard and explore your expertise in the criminal justice in the global arena, and try hard to acquire more information from the ICC. There are a lot of information in the website and other measures. Then try to do that. And as Judge Chun said, there are some rooms to improve the practices of the ICC, and there is room to explore a new field. The other way is, as I said, working as practitioners or legal officers in your country to promote your criminal justice system and work for the ICC from the outside. Once you are required to cooperate with the ICC, you can cooperate in the proper way as requested. That is another way. So there are so many ways to support the ICC and work with ICC. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the organization very kindly give us some more time for some questions. So I'll take from the floor 3 questions at once. Who can I give the floor? Mrs. Saumao? Thank you, by the way, very much for helping in the preparation.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor, for your inspiring talks. And I'm Mao Xiao. I work for the NGO Chinese Initiative on International Law. And my question to both of the judges is that, don't you think that the value pursued by international criminal justice is sort of contrary to Asian culture? Let me explain. To give an example, as a Chinese, I was born in a region in China where the Confucius culture is prevalent. We're told from a young age that we need to respect the authorities, we need to be humble, and there's also a culture of collectivism in China or in some other parts of Asia. While when it comes to the international criminal justice, for me it seems that international criminal justice pursues a value of individualism. It pursues international criminal responsibility rather than collective responsibility. It asks subordinates to disregard their superiors when they think that they are committing international crimes. So in this sense, do you think that the international criminal justice is sort of contrary to Asian culture? Thank you.
Another question. Yes, I'll take 3 at once. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Zhao Meng from Leiden University, Faculty of Law. I got a quick question. So there's an idea about some Asian states are facing quite intensive political pressure from the Western states. And do you consider that could be one possibility that leads to the reluctance to join the ICC? Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. My name is Matteo Tonella. I work for the Coalition for the International Criminal Court here in The Hague. I'd like to pick up on the speech of President Kwon. Thank you for that. One of our greatest battles is for universality as well. So what I would like to ask, and also maybe our Chinese colleague can help with that, is where do we have leverage in promoting universality in the Asia-Pacific region? How do we convince states to ratify the Rome Statute? I'm not going to ask you the name of states, but if you're willing to share some. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have the question of if the pursuit of international criminal justice is not contrary to the Asian culture. And then we have the question of Leiden University, which is also into that direction. And then I have the question which already was touched upon by President Kwon on the universality and how to convince states. Who can I give the floor on those 3 questions?
Yes, let me briefly. Thank you very much for your questions, very important questions, but unfortunately it seems that some are not some desirable questions for judges to answer because we are not politicians and we are not diplomats. So we can answer only within our capacity due to our code of ethics. But I will briefly tell you this again because as already mentioned by President Kwon, right, diversity in Asia and also some different concepts or philosophies in Asia, but we are pursuing the same ideas, values, which is already widespread throughout the whole people and the whole world. So if we saw those things, we can a little easily overcome those things behind. So if we see more something we can push it together, then we can also forget about those difficulties and hindrances. So this is my general answer on these issues. And if we, then maybe also useful to promote for more state parties from Asian Pacific region. But now today we have Mr. Michael Liu from China. He's actually kind of focal point of ICC to China. So as an example, which I cannot give to some extent, I think he can give some answers. His effort, especially in China, to promote such ideas of the ICC, or if okay, so can I ask you, give us some brief answers from the floor as well? Yeah.
Thank you, Judge. I was not totally unprepared for this. If I can answer your question first, I think I cannot, well, the best thing I can do is to share our experience of another international organization where I worked for, International Committee of Red Cross. It's very friendly to China and vice versa as well. What they have been doing for the past is to persuade China a good international order is good for your business as well, with regards to wherever you are doing business in Africa or around the world. I think that has been very effective. Or I need to be close. Okay, I'll speak louder. I think that has been effective. We are really idealist, me as working in the civil society as an NGO, but we also need to take baby steps, as Nora, Ambassador Nora always tells us, the Dutch baby steps, one by one. You tell them this is good for international order you're working in, and maybe later ask them to join the club as a core member. With the Asian values, I have constantly thinking about that. My capacity as an NGO worker and has to do advocacy values, but I sometimes ask myself, who am I as well? I speak English. Do I need to dress like an Asian in this courtroom to represent the Asian values? My point is that Asian is already changing. We need to embrace that change as well. If we're already a member, a very important member in the P5 and also in the Human Rights Council, and also other Asian countries like Japan and Korea, very important United Nations member, we need to embrace certain values. Maybe it is not in the same as the past, but we need to work in that direction. This is not one set zone, like we can finish tomorrow. But I think we need to move in that direction. And sometimes that means we have to give up something we used to be very much proud of or get used to. Thank you.
Michael, I think President Kwon, and then I will close off. President Kwon can add something.
Okay, I'm not sure whether I can answer the question, but Judge Chung precisely indicated the meaning of becoming a state party. That can be the answer to you, the gentleman out there. What does it mean that that state has decided to become a Rome Statute member? It's expression to protect its people. Yeah, often people distinguish the human rights and humanitarian law. How is it different? What's the difference? Human rights law is the law to protect its citizens from the abuse of national government power. But the people misunderstand that international humanitarian law is something different. Yeah, it applies when the government does not function at the time of armed conflict or such a situation, when the government cannot properly function. Then international humanitarian law applies to protect there. So if the government decides to be under the umbrella of the Rome Statute, it means that it's dedicated to protect its people when it's not functioning. With all the international community. Given the complementarity, it's not the concession of sovereignty at all. As long as able and willing, there's no room for the international community. So to ratify the Rome Statute means you go along with the international community. We say sustainable peace is not possible without justice. So it means that you share the common goal with all the international community, and heighten your brand power of your country, and it's expression and dedication to protect your people. In that sense, the international humanitarian law, international human rights, is not inconsistent with the Asian country have been dedicated to protect its people, well-being. So it's totally consistent. Thank you. That would be my answer.
Thank you very much, President Kwon. I have to close off now, and I would like to thank the judges on both sides for their contribution. I really hope, quoting you, Judge Akane, that there will be a new momentum commemorating this 20 years of Rome Statute. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over the floor. And I also would like to thank you, because this is my last appearance, to thank the organization for this afternoon session. Thank you very much, Sash and Audrey, Christian Mark.
Thank you so much to both our judges and Ambassador Stehauer for that insightful discussion, and of course to President Kwon and to Michael Liu for their wonderful interventions from the floor. I would now like to invite the registrar of the ICC, Mr. Peter Lewis, who has waited patiently, to share with us his thoughts about the relationship between the court and the Asia-Pacific region. Registrar.
Mr. President, judges, Ambassador, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be able to address you today. Now, in the final session and the final segment of today's program, you'll have the opportunity to hear from people, current staff of the ICC, junior professional officers, interns, visiting professionals from the Asia-Pacific region who actually work in the court, and they'll be able to give you their experience of what it's like to work here, and I hope to encourage you to consider applying for some of these posts. And they'll talk in more detail about what it's like to work here. But before I hand over to the panel, I just want to say a few words about our relationship and some of the challenges with your region, with the region you represent, and also to make a personal plea to you about what contribution you can make. The President and I were very fortunate about a month ago to be in a part of the world where there's a very different relationship with the court than the one your country's experienced. We're in South America, where every country in South America is a state party. Now, these are countries that have endured really trying and testing times. Many of them have emerged from periods of, as you will be aware, really difficult internal strife, many years of armed conflict. Authoritarian regimes have been widespread with some very, very unfortunate human rights practices. These countries have emerged from that experience. And what they've all wanted to do, all of them, is make a pledge to their people. What President Kwan has said. The pledge was not a pledge so much about what they would do internationally. It was not a pledge about ceding their sovereignty. It was clear from the dialogue we were having that these countries were making a pledge to their people, a promise, the future, and a statement of the journey these countries had made. That's what they were trying to do. People see the court in different ways. A huge issue that took place in Rome 20 years ago was that 120-odd sovereign states, desperately proud of their own legal systems and of their independence and sovereignty, made a collective promise that in their own countries they would outlaw genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. Solemn promise. And they also created this court. For those rare cases where they were unable to actually undertake and deal with some of these cases, that there would be a court of last resort to deal with them. That is the promise. That's what happened 20 years ago in Rome. I hope we can encourage, and you can help encourage, more states to think about these promises. Now, it's about my ask of you. You're going to hear about what the court can do for you if you want to consider employment here. But you saw the video at the start of this proceedings about the creation of the Rome Statute 20 years ago. It was an undoubted moment of magic. Right? There were fantastic geopolitical alignments that took place. Cold War had ended. There was a period of prosperity. And those factors undoubtedly helped us create the court 20 years ago. And if you look at the film that you just saw, the bit at the end when it showed the Rome Statute, you will see lots of people of my age and President Kwan's age. And it looks like they were the generation that brought in the court, but that's not true. Anybody who was there in Rome, or like me, in the prep comms that followed, and we were trying to bring the court to life, will know that the engine of change, the people who brought about the change, were a generation of young professionals, right? People not much older than you, many the same age as you. And they weren't necessarily working in the delegations, though some of them were. Many in the delegations, many working in civil society, not all of them from countries that were going to become, that were obviously going to become state parties. But they worked and persuaded and went back home and made the case for change. And with their help, the more senior politicians had the authority and the strength to make a deal. And it didn't just stop there. I've heard ambassadors tell me themselves about countries who have joined the Rome Statute, become state parties later, that sometimes within a ministry there was one young person who was interested in international criminal justice, understood, found out what the court was about, and was a persuasive voice for change. Sometimes one person, aided by civil society with other young people, with enthusiasm. There was magic in Rome 20 years ago. Be part of the magic now.
Thank you, Registrar, for those very inspiring remarks. We know that the Registrar has to leave, but we are beginning now our final panel discussion for the afternoon, and it is, as Registrar said, a panel featuring ICC staff from the region. So I would like to invite the moderator, the Director of External Operations, Christian Marr, to take the stage along with the panelists, Sarah De La Rosa, Maureen Lamonge, Pubudu Sachidanandan, Azalea Aguirre Rackhorst, Jae-Chan Lee, Chitranga Des Singh, and Kana Hayashida. If you would all please come up. No, this is actually a different screen. Audrey? If you want to start, we can, you want to start? It was all set up. We have computer issues, and it's not an event unless you have at least one problem with the computer, so.
Murphy's Law, what can you do?
Now it's configuring Windows. Thank you.
Very good. We'll get started while we try to fix the technical issue. My name is Christian Marr. I'm the Director for External Operations. A real warm welcome to all of you here and those of you joining us online. I'm a lawyer. You'd never guess from my name, but I'm actually Japanese. I've been working for the ICC for about 2 years. Before that, I joined, and we'll talk about some of these points later on if you're interested. I joined the UN about 23 years ago as a junior professional officer. I worked for the UN Refugee Agency for 10 years at the start of my career. And for 11 years after that, I worked for the UN Security Council in New York. And 2 years ago, I joined the ICC as the Director for External Operations. I'm really looking forward to moderating this session. This session is fundamentally different from what we had planned for the first session. This is very much trying to, instead of looking at the big picture of international criminal justice, we'd like to bring it down to the level of staff members, looking at international criminal justice, once again, from the standpoint of staff members. Essentially, what is it like working for the court? And most importantly, how did many of our staff members end up working for the court and get advice from them? So in nature, it's a bit different from the type of discussion that we had for this first session. Would it be possible? I'd like to give you a few facts before we Very good. Thank you. That worked. Essentially, I thought it would be useful to give you a few factoids. Some of these points and statistics you've heard before, but I thought I'd set the scene before we move to the panel. You may know this already. We have 123 states parties, 138 signatories. And you'll note immediately there's a bit of a gap between the members within the UN, which is 193. So essentially, we have exactly 70 more states to go to reach universality. We're moving in that right direction. We're up to 123. And really, as we discussed, we really need to increase the number of states. And particularly, as we discussed in Asia, there are 19 states amongst Asia-Pacific states that are members of the Rome Statute. And once again, if you look at the distribution globally, and I'll show you the next chart, I'm going a bit quickly through these, but the main point is really to illustrate the fact, the same statistic you heard from President Ibo Osuji earlier, which is when you compare Asia, Asia-Pacific to the other parts of the world, it is significantly low in terms of states that are parties to the Rome Statute. We have a very long way to go. And as we've mentioned, we certainly hope that you will play a role in increasing the numbers. No pressure, but we expect you to help us. I broke down Asia into a bit more, instead of just saying Asia-Pacific. This gives us a bit of a feel as to the slight difference amongst, within Asia. You have Central Asia, where 20% of the states in Central Asia are state parties to the Rome Statute. East Asia, 38. Southern Asia, 33. Southeast Asia, 18. Western Asia is very low amongst, even within that region at 11%. And Pacific Islands at 35%. As far as the presence of Asian judges here in the court, you've already heard from two of the judges here. We have Judge Kuniko Ozaki, who is completing her cases this year. We have Judge Chung. We have Judge Chung from our Republic of Korea. We have Judge Pangalangan from the Philippines, and we have Judge Akane from Japan. In terms of staff members here in the court that are from the Asia-Pacific, it varies, as you can see, from the various sections, units within and different organs within the court. The three bigger organs, the judiciary, 8%, the Office of the Prosecutor, 7%, and the registry, 6%. All that leads to an average of about 7% of the entire population of staff members here in the court, which is a little over 1,100. 7% is Asian. So even within there, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made. When we talk about geographical representation, this is relatively similar to the numbers and the calculation used by the United Nations. This is based on the assessed contribution of states parties. So a lot of it depends on how much they provide in terms of assessed contributions. They decide on that basis what would be a favorable number of staff members represented from each of these countries. When you look at the 19 states parties here, only 4 are in balance. 4 are underrepresented based on their assessment, and 11 are simply not represented. So essentially, if you look at this, we're looking at about 79% of states are either underrepresented or not represented in the court in terms of their proportionality, in terms of geographic distribution. So once again, that's a reiteration of the fact that we need a lot more Asian staff members to join us. That was the general factoid. Now, I'll soon be calling upon my panel members. Before that, I have a number of resources in the floor. You've already heard from Michael Liu, the Executive Director and founder of the Chinese Initiative International Law, CIIL. He's also a key figure in the Chinese moot court competition, which, as you heard, the finals were held today. And he was formerly with us at the ICC, working at the ICC. So he brings to bear a lot of different experiences. We also have a number of individuals from our Human Resources Department, David Flaherty, and we also have with David Minako Sugisaki. Do you mind standing up, the two of you? Thank you. There you are. They're here so that if we get specific questions regarding human resources, they'll be able to help us. But most importantly, you might want to keep their faces in mind when we have the reception later on, in case you just happen to be interested. So I just wanted to bring them to your attention. Thank you, Minako and David. Before we begin, I just wanted to ask all of you, how many of you are either lawyers or law students? Can you raise your hand? Okay, fairly good number. The reason why I asked that is because one of the important messages we also want to send across, and I think you'll see from the composition of the panelists soon, that from our standpoint, we absolutely need lawyers, but we also absolutely need non-lawyers. So there happens to be a tendency that most people think of the ICC and they think you have to be a lawyer. No, and I don't think I'm making a mistake, David, if I were to say that the majority of staff members in the court are not lawyers. I think I'm safe saying that. So anyway, I want to send a message to those of you who are not lawyers that we are equally interested, if not even more interested, in those of you as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn to the panelists. In terms of the questions, I have a number of questions that I, as a prerogative of the moderator, have prepared that I'll be asking the first 2-3 questions on that basis. I understand I'll be given questions from the floor in writing, if some of these have been provided to us. We also have questions that we'll take directly from the floor, and the third set of questions will come from those watching us or following us via Facebook. As I mentioned, I'd be very grateful because of the composition of the panel if your questions could be specific about the types of activities, what it's like to work for the ICC, that type of questioning, as opposed to some of the big picture policy questions that were asked for the first segment. So now I'd like to pose the first question. This question I'll ask all the panelists to answer. The first question is really for the panelists to tell us who they are, what they do within the court, and how they managed to get here, what their path was. So perhaps I figured there's no better way to kick it off by having a trial lawyer kick this off. I'll ask Pupudu, if you can take the floor, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pubudu Sachitanandan. Every judge that I appear before has difficulty with the second section. So I'm a trial lawyer, and I'm from Sri Lanka, and I've been at the court for since about 2004. Back then I was relatively young, and when I had left Sri Lanka for a postgraduate course it was a summer school in Salzburg, one of my lecturers was a gentleman called Morten Bergsmo. He was it turned out that he was the head of the legal advisory section at the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC. And towards the end of our course, he said, you know, have you ever thought of applying for legal advisory work? I hadn't at that time, but then I thought, because it was suggested to me, that I would try to apply. And for some reason, I got into the legal advisory section. And that was the beginning of a really fantastic journey. It was, Holland is as different from Sri Lanka as you can possibly be in terms of weather, food, etc. But it was the beginning of a fantastic journey. And after a few months in legal advisory, there was a gap in one of the first trial teams that were starting at the court, which was the team for the Coney case. I'm sure many of you have heard of Joseph Coney. And that is, and therefore I moved from the legal advisory section to the trial section, despite not having done much trial work at that point at all. And then, for some reason, stayed there for the next 12 years or so. And it has been a wonderful journey. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Bupadu. Then perhaps maybe we'll move to chambers. We can ask Chitran Gada, maybe perhaps you can take the floor.
Yeah, and like Pupudu, the problem is with my first name as opposed to the last. I am a lawyer from India. I finished my first law degree in India with a master's afterwards in the United States, and I first started at the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia as an intern with the Appeals Chamber. Then I moved to defense work, which was fascinating. And I worked in the team of prosecutor versus Stanisic and Simatovic, which was an eventful case in its own right. Then I worked in Cambodia in the office of the lead co-lawyers for civil parties as a legal consultant and also as case manager. And it's been 1.5 years. I was back here in January last year. I started as an associate legal officer with the Appeals Chamber, and now I'm currently working in trial, and that's it's been a very, very intense journey. Don't regret any of it. Fascinating experiences with different people, different conflicts, different courts, different legal systems, and I love it, basically. That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Perhaps then our other member from Chambers, Jay Chan, and given that you're a visiting professional, maybe you can tell us a bit more about the whole procedure of visiting professionals as well. That might be quite useful for the audience. Thank you.
Working? Hello everyone, my name is Jae Chan, and I am from South Korea. I am working as a visiting professional in Appeal Chamber. A visiting professional program is for persons who have intensive experiences in their professional careers. So we do mainly legal research, and the term is between 3 to 6 months. So unfortunately, I'm not the staff here, but I served as a legal officer in Korean Navy for 3 years, and after that, I have been working as a judge in Korean domestic court for 10 years. So, sorry. So I am currently a judge in Korean court. Even though I have built up most of my careers in domestic field, I have been interested in international law and comparative law for a long time. And there are several other Korean judges like me, so we gathered together, we made some working group, so we are studying some comparative law or international law. So I have been working in one of the group which studies about the US legal system. So when Korean court announced that you will pick one judge, we will send one judge to the ICC as a visiting professional for 1 year, I applied, and luckily I got selected. So that's how I came to work here. Some of you will have jobs in international organizations, but some of you will have jobs in domestic field, in domestic works. What I want to tell you, to have jobs in international organizations is not the only way that you can contribute to or you can work in international field. You can, how can I say, you can contribute to international field by working in your government or in your embassy, in law firms, or like by secondment by government like me. So if you want to contribute to international justice, keep your interest in this field and keep you prepared. Then even if you are working in domestic field, you may have an opportunity to work in international field. And I actually see several staffs had worked in their domestic field before coming to the ICC. So please keep you motivated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Perhaps now we'll move to the Trust Fund for Victims. Maureen?
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Lamonge. I'm from Indonesia. I work at the Trust Fund for Victims as Associate Executive Officer. At the Trust Fund for Victims, I support the fund related to external relation activities, fundraising, advocacy, as well as program management. So at the external relations, we need to liaise with states parties, of course, with the civil societies regarding our programs in assistance mandate and corporations, but also with academics and media. Thank you for Judge Yang and Judge Akane for mentioning about voluntary contributions that the Trust Fund rely on to implement assistance program and preparations. We need your support and commitment, actually, so that we can provide assistance that the victims need and to realize the reparations for their rights to receive reparations. My background, I'm not a lawyer. I studied at the Hague University in Bachelor in European Studies. I've learned about ICC when I studied there for international organizations. I didn't know that I could apply to ICC if I didn't study law. So I applied to one of the vacancy for short-term assistance, and I was lucky enough to be accepted. And I learned a lot, especially for non-lawyers here at the court, that there are other parts that that we can provide our expertise, our background. And for example, in this case, at the Trust Fund for Victims, I learned a lot about program implementations, the reality in the field offices, security issues, the operational, that whenever there is decision to launch assistance program, for example, that there are several steps, there are several risks that we need to think about. And that's for the benefits for the victims and the affected communities. So for me, it's I'm very fortunate and very humbled experience for me to learn a lot from different sides at the court, and to be able to be here for the past couple of years. I think I will stop there.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Perhaps Sarah, I'll go to you now. Yes.
Good afternoon, honorable judges, colleagues, and guests. I am Sarah Hazel de la Rosa from the Philippines. I am currently an intern here at the ICC in the procurement unit, and previously also an intern at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Manila, Philippines. In my country, we have to obtain a bachelor's degree in order for us to be admitted to law school. In my case, however, After finishing my Bachelor of Arts in Legal Management degree at the University of Santo Tomas, Manila, Philippines, I decided to pursue my legal education at the University of Groningen, wherein I am in my third year studying LLB International and European Law. Last school year, I was eager to secure an internship here at this court. Hence, I applied to 21 different internship positions. And when the HR sent me an email that the procurement unit offered me an internship, I immediately took it. My current task as an intern in the procurement unit includes checking and reviewing the contracts the unit engages to, specifically the service and software agreements for the maintenance and advancement of the court. I also examine whether the vendors of these contracts have deviations from the terms and agreements that are being implemented by the court. Thank you.
Then we'll go to the other extreme. Kana, please.
Thank you, Christian. Hi, everyone. My name is Kana, and I'm from Japan. I came here last summer, so it's going to be soon 1 year next month, through the program called JPO. Maybe may I ask you to raise your hand if you know anything about JPO program? Only the court people, but it's good. So JPO is Junior Professional Officer, so that's not Japan, JPO of Japan, unfortunately. And that's an agreement based on a bilateral agreement between a state party and an international organization. So in my case, it's between Japanese government and ICC. I applied to the program last spring, and I was selected. I was assigned to the ICC, but it's funded by Japanese government, so that's a program. And the objective of the program is to provide a young professional, so I'm technically still young, and to provide, yes, thank you, to provide a young professional with opportunities to work in the international field, especially for those who do not have special experience working in the field. Yeah, that's the objective that is written on the website, and the actual objective is that I find a decent position after this program. And that's important for me, but also important for the sponsoring government. So in my case, Japanese government in terms of geographic representation, as Christian introduced. So that's a program. And what I do here is business administration. So I'm also one of the representatives of a non-lawyer today, and it's such a pleasure to speak in front of lawyers and smart people. But anyway, what I'm doing is nothing to do with judicial service or court cases, but it's more about management services. And that's also an important pillar of the management of the court. So there are human resources, there is finance, budget, and all those things. And what I do is, for example, coordination of reporting to the external oversight bodies. So those things are also there as a needed job here. My background is finance and audit, so I have never studied law or justice, but I have been working in one of the big 4 accounting firms back in Japan for about 7 years, and that experience led me to come here through a JPO program, and I'm enjoying work here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kana. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we currently have JPO programs with the Republic of Korea, Japan, Switzerland. Is that it, or? Yes. And it's something that is hopefully expanding to a much wider set of countries as well. Thank you. And last but not least, Azelia, you have the floor. Thank you.
At least it's not a surprise when I'm going to talk because I'm the last one. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Azalea Rackhorst, or Aza for short. I'm from the Philippines. I'm a proud mother of a 1-year-old girl. but I'm also very unhappy that she's approaching the terrible 2 stage. So I'm married to a Dutchman. I've been living in The Hague now for 10 years. And before that, I was living in Scotland. I was working there. So for me, the change in weather is actually a good thing. It was a positive, positive experience for moving here. My role in ICC, I am the head of Information Management Unit. It's a unit within the IT department. And we're around, well, we are 10 people in the unit. And we're the least technical within the department. And what does this mean? We're actually focusing more on how information and data is actually organized. And what we do is that we offer support to the different sections, to the different organs of the court, to be able to organize their data, their records, in a way that they're able to search and retrieve the information as quickly as possible in order for them to be able to make decisions and also help them with completing their tasks. In terms of the sources of the data, there's 2 main sources that we're looking at and what the unit is looking at or referring to. The first source is internal records or documents, which are documents that are created by ICC itself, ICC staff. So as an example of this, these are court records. The other main source of information that we help provide is for external sources or legal databases. So for example, Westlaw or LexisNexis. And this is also why the library, the ICC library, is under my unit. So indeed, for that purposes, we are also helping out in terms of legal research. I started in ICC back in 2012, which is a year after the Philippines has ratified the Rome Statute. I started in 2012, not in this role that I have, but as a team lead in an administration system. And how do I explain what I do to lawyers who ask me, what do I do at the court? So what I tell them is that, well, I try to help make you happy. And they say, how? Well, the system that we're running and making sure works is the system that provides you your salary. So in case we don't want any cranky lawyers, we need to make sure that that system is up and running. So that's how I started at the court. I have a business administration background. Before the court, I was working for a consulting company, was previously based in Amsterdam, and before that in the UK. So my background is in business management, process improvement, and in project management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you got a bit of a flavor of the very, very different expertise required for us to run a court. I have one more question, and if I can ideally ask all of you to spend a minute or two to answer this point, which is really what motivated you all to pursue a career in international criminal justice? So maybe this time we'll just go maybe from Kana, if we can start that way, and then we'll go down the road.
Sure. It's a tough question since I wasn't very familiar with international criminal justice, so I didn't have much knowledge about this court before I applied this position. But actually, I was quite surprised that there are so many job opportunities that those people who do not have such background can do here. And yeah, so. And the court is celebrating 20 years of adoption since adoption of Rome Statute, but still it's considered to be a young organization. And in terms of management services, there are always opportunities to improve process, to make it more efficient and effective, to make state parties happy, and also, of course, and to run the business more efficiently. So in terms of management services, there are always things to do, and that's exactly what I can bring my experience from my past career, and it's a privilege that I can be part of this process and indirectly contributing to the justice.
Very good, thank you.
Hi, when I was, so my interest actually did start when I was in India, and I was working very closely with lawyers that work in criminal law, and that is something I found quite fascinating because it's something that is very closely involved in studying the human condition. I find that very intriguing. I had the privilege of studying my master's program outside of India, where I studied international law and procedure, both public and private international law. And so it seemed like the natural progression of things, and we've all been at that stage where we apply everywhere, looking, and I was lucky to get the internship at the ICTY, and I just didn't stop. And the more number of years I've spent working and studying in this field, the more I find my motivation being more self-fueling than anything else. That's it.
Well, first, inspired by Azela, I also have to say that I'm a proud father of 2 kids, because they will see me by Facebook later. Personally, since when I was young, I was interested in communicating with people from various cultures. That was maybe one of the main reasons why I came here. And I wanted to know what is the difference and what is the similarity between Korean domestic court and international court. I see several differences, but also the basic legal approach have some kind of similarity. So maybe I can contribute somewhat to the international court with my domestic experience, and also I can learn something from the international court system. And I also wanted to broaden and deepen my understanding about people and culture and world, because it will definitely help my job back in Korea to be a judge. So yeah, that's the motivations for me. Thank you.
For me, because of my background, it was more the international environment. So I was fortunate enough to have been applied, to have been selected for a particular position within ICC. I like working in an international environment because then the work dynamics is different. You really learn from the different cultures. You really learn, and quickly as well, how to deal with the different situations. And it's really good for career development. Specifically for ICC, of course, and why I stay is because I can at least do in my capacity what I can to contribute in such a noble cause and be able to support the people who do fight impunity.
I can't think of a specific trigger, but I can think of a general trigger. In Sri Lanka, there was a war that started in 1977 onwards. And I was born a few years after that. I won't say how many years. And the war continued and continued and continued. And when I left Sri Lanka in 2004, it was still running. In fact, it continued until 2009. So my entire life in Sri Lanka was, there was this experience, although I was not in a war zone, there was this understanding of how terrible it is when a system breaks down, how terrible it is when the rules stop being followed and people have to fight. So, and that was, I think, a very powerful motivator to work in a place like this.
My motivation at the very beginning, like I mentioned before, I'm not a lawyer. After I graduated from my bachelor's degree, I applied to many organizations out of fear of deportation and unemployment because I'm not a EU citizen. So I'm very fortunate enough to be able to get in the ICC, and And I realized the importance of international criminal justice from my experience at the Trust Fund, because delivering justice not only at the courtroom but also in the field to be able to deliver meaningful reparative justice to them. And I'm very lucky to be able to go to the field to meet the victims, survivors, the affected communities, to be able to hear what they have suffered many years ago, and for them the courage to tell us, to tell me also about their stories, their fear, their hope for a better future. That gives me commitment for my work, at least with my little experience, I would say, and just a bit of my ability to provide some kind of assistance for them. I think for me, that makes me passionate and very lucky enough to be working at the International Criminal Court. Thank you.
My fascination in law, particularly in international law, began when I was still a third-year college student in the Philippines, when we had principles of international law as a subject, from which I learned that state as a sovereign entity has the responsibility to protect its citizens against internal and external forces that would be inimical to the welfare of them. I was intrigued by this field of study when I became familiar with the roles of international organizations and international courts in assisting states with basic necessities of the citizens in times of grave conflicts and their tasks in administering justice to the victims of atrocities. I finally decided to aspire to be an international lawyer in the future after undergoing an internship at the UNHCR, when we had a glimpse of difficulties attendant to the resolution of legal problems concerning with my country's implementation and execution of international humanitarian law. Furthermore, as a daughter of a Filipino lawyer, I happened to observe the conduct of court proceedings in my country, and I had witnessed that the rule of law plays a pivotal role in the maintenance of peace and order in the community. My father's ideas also have a tremendous impact, not only in my upbringing, but also in honing my sense of justice and fairness. However, unlike him, my dream is to be able to practice a legal career beyond the Philippine borders and be one of the crusaders of defending civil liberties in different states, of different nations, because I believe that justice should transcend every state boundary, a universal and an inherent right of every person, regardless of gender, color, nationality, and religion. For no one should have no master but law, no guide but conscience, no aim but justice. And these are the very principles enshrined under the preamble of the Rome Statute, which specifically states that the court is affirming that the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole must not go unpunished, determined to put an end to impunity for the perpetrators of these crimes, and thus to contribute to the prevention of such crimes, resolved to guarantee lasting respect for the enforcement of international justice. Anchored upon this conviction that I intend to specialize in international criminal law in the future, and hopefully come back to this honorable institution as one of the lawyers who advocates for the court's ideas and aspirations in ending impunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for answering these questions. We have about 35 minutes left, so I think hopefully that'll be plenty of time to take questions from the floor. Just before we start asking you questions, since we have Michael, as I mentioned earlier on, Michael Liu, if you don't mind just also giving us a bit of background as to why you became involved in this field, what interested you, and also if you can tell us a little bit about your organization as well. You have the floor, Michael. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but...
Okay, good. My name is Michael Liu. I'm a lawyer from China, where I'm still based. I have an office here in The Hague, thanks to the gracious support from the municipality and the ministry. We have an office here in The Hague next to the Peace Palace, which I invite everyone to visit when you have a chance. answer your question, what I'm doing now, I started to work as a lawyer in Beijing, and then because I still like international law, so I moved on to work in the international law field, firstly with ICRC and then Cambodian Tribunal. And during my 2 breaks of Cambodian tribunals, I come to here, be an intern for Judge Song, the president of the court, for 6 months, and then go back to Cambodia. With this various experience, I think I gradually understand that the role of the civil society, the NGOs, how important it is for an organization like this court. I heard someone from the Coalition of International Criminal Court, which I'm very proud of to be member of. Actually, the coalition starts before we have a court. We are celebrating the 20 years of International Criminal Court, but the coalition actually started before and then creates the court. As the registrar was sharing that there are many young people in that Rome conference. I think lots of them are from the coalition. So I was very inspired and then created this new NGO because that combines my 2 favorite things, international justice and that part of the region, China. So I'm doing, I'm based, like I said, based in Beijing and here, working on various international justice issues, and international criminal justice is one, and refugee issues another one. I feel very privileged that I can having all those experience in and out of the court. Today we're in the court prosecuting the bad people. Tomorrow I'll be flying to Lebanon, and next week I'll be seeing the victims of the atrocities who shouldn't be the victim if this court be at its maximum effect to end the impunities. So at my work, I can see a broad spectrum of issues, and I see the very important work of the court, and I also see that we sometimes need to think out of the box and understand that justice is not done by one institution, by one individuals, but we need to work together, like various panelists have shared. Did I miss any part of the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. And it's, I must say, Michael, it's very reassuring to know that we have partners like you in the Asia Pacific. Thank you very much. So without further ado, you have the floor. Any questions that we could take from the floor?
Hi, my name is Kruti. My question is to Mr. Pubudu. As a trial lawyer in the ICC, I wanted to know on a day-to-day basis, what does your work entail? Do you research? Do you draft? Do you also get to appear in matters? And if you could tell us some of your experiences working on some cases here.
Sure. Thank you for the question. At the ICC, unlike many domestic jurisdictions, what your work is as a trial lawyer really depends on what stage your case is at, because we have very long cases. So early in a case, before you ask for an arrest warrant, for example, you may be doing a lot of investigative work, even though you're a lawyer. You may be drafting things like arrest warrant applications, etc. And then as your case matures, your work evolves and becomes more litigation related. So then after you have an arrest warrant, after perhaps you have your suspect and later accused here, you will be making submissions in court, or rather that's been my experience, making submissions in court at confirmation hearings, hopefully getting your charges confirmed, although not getting confirmed has also been my experience sometimes. Then you move on to the trial phase, and that's where you do, as a trial lawyer here, you do work which is more commonly seen around the world, which is you take witnesses, and occasionally you make either oral motions before the court, or you draft filings and get those confirmed, get those approved or rejected. And then as a trial lawyer, you do that until the end of the trial phase, at which point we have a separate appeals section. So our appellate work is not usually done by people like me. There's a separate set of lawyers who do the appellate work. In terms of my own experiences, I started on, in fact, the very first arrest warrant application here against Joseph Kony and 4 of his brigade commanders. And then I also worked on the Katanga and Ngujolo case, where Mr. Ngujolo was acquitted, but Mr. Katanga was convicted. Then there were a number of cases relating to Darfur that some of you may have heard. There was, of course, the arrest warrants against certain members of the Sudanese government, but also cases against certain leaders of certain rebel groups fighting in Darfur. That is how we got the Abu Garda case and the Abdallah Banda case here. And then I also had the benefit of working on the Central African Republic. And finally, and somewhat unusually, in January 2015, when I was working on the Central African Republic, we heard that Mr. Dominic Ongwen had been arrested and was going to be brought to the seat of the court. So in a sort of unusual circle of life, I went back to the case that I started my career with. So that was, so that's what I'm working on now, in fact, and that is the case in which I had the benefit of appearing before Judge Chung. And that is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm in the middle of a criminal trial, so we have just finished the prosecution phase, and we are waiting to begin the defense phase.
Thank you, Pupudu. We have another question. In the back, maybe we'll go there and we'll go to you after. Yes, please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kennedy and I'm from the United States. As an aspiring lawyer for international law, it's often a daunting thought when trying to get a foot in the door and finding a professional post within an international tribunal due to extremely large pools of highly qualified applicants vying for the same positions. Do you have any tips for how to set yourself apart from that pool?
Who wants to take on that daunting question? Maybe we'll call on some of the lawyers. Chitrangada, please.
To be honest, I'm still figuring out what was it that made it work. I think going forward, I do have somewhat of a plan more than I did at the time when I was looking for work and when I was applying in different tribunals and hybrid and international. And I think the only, I think you have to be really honest about what you can contribute to a particular case or to a particular court. I think I mean, we all agree that everyone fluffs up their goods, but at a certain point, I think you have to have that conversation with yourself about why you're applying to this place and what you can actually contribute. Because I think that genuineness and that honesty is what will set you apart. And people who will be reading your applications or will be interviewing you, they have seen thousands of applications. They've read more than 1,000 of cover letters. I think what does really stand out is yeah, basically, it's not about presenting yourself. I think it's about presenting your honest self, about being very matter of fact about these are my skills, these are my weaknesses, this is what I can provide. And I think that shows that shows a deeper commitment, I think, to the cause and to the work that you will be providing at the tribunal or court, as the case may be.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to tackle that one? No, thank you very much. But I was wondering if anyone else wanted to tackle it, or no, we're okay? Perhaps there was another question over there, yes. Lady.
Hello. Oh, yes. My name is Elena. I represent the Cyprus Embassy. And I wanted to ask you what skills you think are most useful in carrying out your day-to-day business in the court, and perhaps what kind of skills helped you to get into your field of work, not just in law, but in the other departments that you work for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then maybe perhaps we'll focus first on the non-lawyer panelists. Any one of you want to take a stab at this one? Please.
Start. I guess in terms of the skill sets, really one of the things is to be a good listener. It is quite common to hear, but it's very hard to do. So that is one important thing. Another thing is patience. In a group of lawyers in a meeting, everyone will want to argue their point and say what they have to say. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to plan time for it. Of course, it helps that you have experience in an international environment already. For my case, that was I guess the determining factor that I did get the job when I applied, because then you are able to know some of the dynamics and some of the challenges that you could already face, and be able to prepare to address those. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else, perhaps maybe Kana, you want to have a go? Thank you.
In my case, my background is finance, as I said, and in my case, it was good that I only focused on this finance and audit, and I didn't try to broaden my specialty, so I could work on a specific area, and that really helped to find a way to come here. And the other thing is that I try to be in the international environment, although I was always working in Japanese companies and only in private sector, but still I try to be in, for example, in a project that involves international implications. That really helps what I'm doing here. Thanks.
Thank you, Kana. Ori, please.
In my case, I think it would be really helpful if you learn French as soon as possible, because that's always help in reading all the filings, or actually for the trust fund implementing assistance and reparations projects. So also for me, from my master's degree in development studies, I learned a lot about how to conduct assessment, how to assessment in the country situations, and then to develop a program management and set up all the steps that need to be taken, and areas that need to be considered, especially in the conflict, post-conflict countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Perhaps maybe, Sarah, you have a unique standpoint from the perspective of an intern. Maybe you can give us a bit of your views on this.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm still an intern, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think it's that the determination is the key, and patience as well. And I think what worked for me is the resiliency in thinking and in believing that no matter how hardships I encounter along the way, the more hardships I encounter, the more it would be rewarding in the end. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists for this question. Are there future, well, yes, please.
Thank you. I don't know who I should direct my question to, but when someone applies for an ICC staff position, is it taken into consideration whether that person is from a party that is a state that is a party to the ICC statute or not?
Thank you very much. Very good question. This is exactly why we have David and the HR team here. Thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you for the question. We do take it into account, me and myself and Minako, we feel we have a responsibility. It's an international criminal court. We're mindful in what we do that we have to have a fair representation of all of our state parties. But that said, we have an obligation to fill the post with the best candidate as well. So with us, the important thing we do is try and legitimize, striking the right balance between respecting the state parties, who's underrepresented and who's not, and the right candidate for the job. And often the right candidate to the job doesn't mean simply the best lawyer we can find. It's the most suitable person relevant to the job. You can see there's lots of ways to get into the court. We focus a lot on staff, but I would say that those trying to get in, think about the JPO program, think about the internship program, think about what you want to do and what's the best avenue for you to get into the court. Languages are very important. I'm not Asian. English is my mother tongue. That's an advantage, but I mean, speaking French is an advantage. I would really just think about where you're from and what you can offer, and then you can link that to your motivation. So that's just a piece of advice, and to answer your question is, we do take it into account, and we do our best to strike a fair balance with skills and nationality and the best person for the job.
Thank you very much, David. Very good. Up front, please.
Thank you. David, I'm going to follow up with a question for you. So I'm Bangladeshi, and my question, when I met with my ambassador, he was saying, the court was really focused on bringing people from Asia. But one of the problems in order for you to get into the court is that you have to worry about how you're going to be able to fund yourself if you do an internship or a visiting professional, because not a lot of countries have that bilateral agreement. And I was wondering, maybe you can answer, what is the court doing right now to encourage people not just from Bangladesh, but you have Afghanistan, Cambodia. I haven't seen their representation at the court at all. Thank you.
Very good. I think I'll swing over to David. David, if you'd like. But just on my part, this is something that our registrar is definitely trying to focus on, the availability of funds for individuals from countries that would benefit from having some kind of financial assistance in order to encourage more interns from those countries. So this is something that we are trying to prioritize, but it's something that is not part of the court's budget, so we would have to go for extra budgetary sources. Hence, it's not a fix that we can do overnight, but it's definitely been raised as a priority matter. But David, do you have any? Yes.
Myself and Monaco are here, and we're quite mindful of the fact that we focus quite a lot of the efforts on the more largely underrepresented states. We're also mindful that more can be done for other underrepresented states. We've implemented a trust fund for funding internships and visitor professional placements, and we have a JPO program. Those things, we've got a big appetite to do those things. They work best with the cooperation between the states and us. We're willing to expand both programs. We're also trying to promote funding for placements from the court's budget, but there's also external funding that we use, and we try and use it to try and promote placements from underrepresented state parties.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. David, you used the question earlier on about, you used the phrase advantage, disadvantage. I took a cue from that, and I'd like to ask the panelists what they feel about, in their perception, what are both the advantages and or disadvantages, if any, of being Asian and working for the ICC? Are there any experiences that you feel it's helped you or it hasn't? I'm sort of very interested because it's something we do as Asian staff members in the court talk about. I'm wondering whether some of you are willing to share some points that might be of interest to the audience. Please.
Just to start off this conversation, possibly, I think it's only an advantage and a disadvantage in hindsight. I would prefer to call them challenges that turn into opportunities or vice versa. I think what I bring to the court is a different perspective of a legal culture, and all the confetti around it, including religious perspective, cultural perspective, linguistic perspective, all of it, the disadvantage is because it's different, and that's also its advantage. And I think, yeah, if the question is framed in a way where we're able to talk about it not as in a very decisive way, I still don't know the answer. Actually, that's why I think it's difficult to answer that when you're currently in it. I think probably 30 years from now, I would know what was the advantage and not. So yeah, just to.
I'll start with a very minor one. In many countries in Asia, you know, there's a certain polite way of getting to the point. And they're usually, definitely in Sri Lanka, and I'm sure in other countries. One of my first experiences working here is working with very direct prosecutors from countries which don't do that. And for about a year, I thought, everyone's tremendously rude. But, and then I think you adjust to that. So that's one minor point. One advantage I found I had was, certainly coming from my background, I'm quite familiar with rural communities, quite familiar with having cultural codes and laws alongside general laws. And for example, I'll give you an example. In certain parts of the West, when somebody experiences trauma, you say they've had post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's sort of a clinical diagnosis. But in many countries, when people go through war, you don't have that kind of clinical term for it. You use a particular cultural connotation for it. And I'm quite familiar with that because in Sri Lanka, sometimes when people have post-traumatic stress or some kind of sometimes mental issues, you have local ways of describing it and treating it. And I found that background very useful when working on Uganda, when working on certain other countries that we were investigating. So that was an unusual advantage.
Thank you very much.
Could I just add to that? Because you brought up trauma, I think trauma processing also is very culture specific, and understanding it from also in communities where reincarnation is a big part of growth as a culture and individual. I think that's where the perspective of someone from an Eastern faith or Eastern faith is of an added value. And the other example I have is from Cambodia, where I was working with the civil parties talking about how they were survivors of forced marriage. And the charge before the court was of crime against humanity, of other inhumane acts for forced marriage, including forced marriage. And I think it helped within our team that we were all women, we were all talking about marriage, and Western perspective was obviously quite dominant in the international side, and I think it helped foster more debate that when you are from a region where arranged marriages and forced marriages, the lines are very blurry, that someone from that region is there to walk you through the process of the legal elements, how to plead the legal elements of a certain crime, as opposed to implicating an entire culture for having certain cultural practices. So just as an example, I think that's where the perspective is really helpful.
Thank you very much, Chitrangada. Thank you. Jay-chan, please.
And I also have to say about the language barrier that it is true that I feel that it does exist, some kind of language barrier. For me, for example, I studied in Korea, I learned many things in Korean. So yeah, to speak fluent English or fluent French can be some advantages, and especially when I was drafting some simple judgment in English, was not easy for me because I have never had that kind of experience. But one good thing, the legal advisor of the appeal chamber emphasized that most of readers of the decision of the ICC does not have English or French as a mother tongue. So he always emphasized that all the decisions should be written in very simple, concise, and easy to understand English, and don't pretend that you are really fluent in English. That does not mean a better decision. He always emphasized, and I totally agree with them, so agree with him. So don't be too afraid, but yeah, it's true that you have to work hard in English and French. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very interesting viewpoints. I know I shouldn't be using my prerogative, and having asked the question myself, it's bad form for me to answer it. But really, if I were to have one tip, really, that I find out, and this is not specific to the ICC, it's general across the board for all international organizations. It comes out when you're interviewing for posts. As Asians, I'm stereotyping here broadly, but we tend to say, we did. Whereas a lot of the people interviewing, the expectation is that we want to hear about what you did. And there clearly is a gap there between individuals who come from cultures that are more inclined to say, we did, my team did, whereas there's a perception on the part of those on the panel, we want to hear about what you did. And there is a bit of a gap there. So those of you interviewing for jobs at the ICC and other international organizations, this is one tip I would like to bring to your attention. Are there any other questions from the floor? Sorry, right over there, yes.
Hi, members of the panel and honorable judges, thank you, and organizers, thank you very much for organizing today's talk. I've actually got a question as to the mental capacity and qualities that members of the panel think a person trying to find a career in international criminal law really should have. Because to me, it's actually, this is like the elephant in the room, because to me, now I'm interning for the prosecution. But it never occurred to me that perhaps working in the international criminal courts would be very traumatizing. It can be very traumatizing and heartbreaking because of the atrocities that you're going to come across and all the witness statements and testimony that you're going to read. So in that term, would you say there should be some mental qualities, or a potential aspiring international criminal lawyer should prepare themselves before they really begin a career in the ICL? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very interesting question. Who would like to tackle that on the panel? Once again, thank you.
That's undeniable. We work in a difficult environment, and it is true that if you work here, not just as a lawyer, even as a, let's say, an audiovisual technician, you will see things here that you don't see if you're working for a movie company back home, of course, or even if you're an analyst or an investigator. So it's important to be prepared for that when you come, and know that when you're applying. Having said that, I don't think anybody needs to be Superman. I think you just need to know it's important, if you find it upsetting, to get help. We have at the ICC some counseling resources, and definitely people like investigators get assistance for what is called secondary traumatization. And that's all there is to it, really. It really is to be open to your own vulnerabilities and always get help if you think it's becoming too much. Yeah.
Please, I guess maybe we'll start with you now.
From my experience, indeed, there are some moments that is traumatizing, even though I've been working at the trust fund for several years. There's nothing that can prepare you really to see or to experience the second degree of traumatization. Here at the office, at the office here, we are looking at the reports and images, but once you go to the field, for example, that you have the person in front of you, and to have to hear them and their hope and their suffering, sometimes it's very traumatizing afterwards. And there is, maybe it's not directly you feel it, but afterwards, and here at the court there are support. It's actually encourage for people to meet the counseling after missions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. During my experience interviewing victims, and often for very grave crimes, I think part of the problem is you start to see yourself, especially when you're a lawyer, you start to see yourself as incapable in certain ways to deal with certain traumatic events, because obviously nobody really tells you about this in law school. Nobody will tell you about this when you start your internship. But I think the added point to what Pubudu has already said is that you shouldn't take that as a disadvantage. I think the fact that you are affected by people's testimonies, people's accounts, is part of your sensitivity, and I think that is very necessary for a lawyer to be able to harness later on. I think it's not something that makes you less capable, in fact, more. And the idea is basically just to manage your stress and your responses in the most healthiest way possible, because it's only when you're healthy that you will be able to help victims in the best way possible. It's often seen as a result of secondary traumatization, and not only with criminal lawyers, but also with people who work with human rights activism, that a lot of these testimonies, there arrives a point where the secondary trauma starts to interfere with the quality of work that you can provide as an activist or as a lawyer. And I think it's very important to take stock of the fact that that it is having that effect, because you're human. It's more than natural to have that effect on you. It would be surprising if it was the other way around, in fact. So I think what's again really important is just to take stock and address in the most healthiest way possible what's happening to you, so that you can also provide. You can be fair to yourself, and you can also be sensitive and, well, mentally qualified to be working with victims. And yeah, that's. It's difficult to realize that. The realization is very slow and very harrowing, but it's possible, and a lot of good can come out of it.
Thank you, Chitrangada. This is an area clearly that when I joined 20 years ago, there was very little attention paid amongst international organizations, but there's clearly, it's a relatively new development across the board for international organizations. The need to recognize that there is vicarious trauma, secondary trauma resulting from the work you do. We have about little less than 5 minutes left. If I can just approach the panelists one by one, if you wouldn't mind just giving us just one or two tips regarding people who are interested in a career in international criminal justice or want to work for ICC. If you can just give us just one or two quick tips. Maybe we'll start with you.
Well, in this regard, I am urging all my Asian brothers and sisters, young professionals, and students from all over the world to look into the field of international criminal justice. I hope that students like me who are also from the Asia-Pacific region and who are also planning to work at an international organization, that they would dare to take the first step in striving to accomplish your goals, no matter how much adversities may come your way, and no matter how far it is from home. Because I believe that growth occurs outside your comfort zone. And though I am not in the finish line yet, and I have not accomplished everything that I have dreamed of career-wise, I know that the more hardships I experience, like I said, the more it would be fulfilling at the end. And I hope that when the time comes, we could work in our own respective fields for the ICC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maureen?
From my side, I think do not afraid to apply, even though you are not a lawyer. I think when you apply, at least you have a much better chances to get shortlisted already. 50% is already there, and then you move forward with a good application, do your motivation letter, and then fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you. Pupudu?
Yes, I'd start from there. When I was in law school, there was a former UN official who came and said, "It's very unlikely that any of you will ever get in." And I found that not particularly, encouraging. So that's not true. Don't think like that. There are plenty of chances to get in, so you need to bear that in mind and apply. And having said that, it's important to do it intelligently. You need to be where you want a job. So I think it's very important to do things like internships in places you want to work at, visiting professionalships where you want to work at. That works for a number of reasons. You learn what happens there, but you also learn about the people who are there. And it's very important, if you want to be like someone, to go and talk to that person and learn, and through sort of osmosis. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Azalea?
Yes. Yeah, for myself, I would advise to really try to see who you know in the court that's already working, ask them the questions. If you don't know anyone, try to connect to them through LinkedIn. We also have HR in LinkedIn as well. Ask the questions there. And also, of course, I try to promote my unit. We have a lot of internships for the library, for the archives and legacy. Please apply. There is a JPO program that we have tried to get someone for in the past. We were not successful, but hopefully with this venue, we could promote that more. So of course, for once you do get an internship or JPO within ICC, then that of course broadens your experience already. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Otela. Jay Chan?
Yeah, I want to say that please keep yourself prepared and motivated for another opportunity. When you are busy in like this work, it's not easy to keep yourself motivated for another work or another opportunity. Sometimes you choose between listening to French class or watching Korean fun TV show, or applying for graduate school or not. It's not easy to go some like difficult paths, but if you keep yourself prepared, you can grab your opportunity, another opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
I have nothing additional to add except underline, learn French.
Thank you very much.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think I should have studied French if I knew. But another thing is that because I was so far from this kind of organization while I was working back in Japan, if I knew that I was going to apply for this job long time ago, then I would have prepared better. So I would encourage you to read job advertisement and look at specific requirements that you need. In my case, I needed to go to get my master's degree, so it took really a lot of time to find my way to here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That completes our panel discussion. If you could join me in a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. You are almost at the reception phase, so I won't make this very long. I will only quickly add that I think this panel is sort of ample proof that probably one of the best things about working at the court is that you get to work with some really fantastic people. So I would like to wrap this up by saying thank you once again to our partners, the Hague Project Peace and Justice, particularly Ambassador Nora Stahauer, and of course to all of our speakers. The President, Judge Ibo Suji, is no longer here, but we're so grateful that he was here. It's a particularly busy time at the court, so also thank you very much to President Kwon, Judge Chung, Judge Akane, and of course the registrar, and of course Christian for moderating, and our fantastic panelists. I have been told that somebody has lost a train ticket. So if that is you, my colleague Audrey at the back has your ticket. It's very important. So I wanted to make that announcement. A reception awaits you downstairs. Our panelists will be there, as well as several of our speakers and our HR colleagues. So please do join us downstairs for the reception. Thank you so much for coming. Also to the people watching online, we're so thrilled that you could be here, and have a great evening.